Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. And a long-term patron of mine wants me to analyze this particular article that has been uploaded to investorjunkie.com. Now, this particular article was published on November 18th, 2022, so it's fairly 9 months old. And it is entitled 8 Popular Collectible Investments and How to Start Investing. Now, I am going to put a link to this particular article in the video description below so that you guys can read it should you so choose. With that being said, I am not recommending this article. I want to be very clear on that. I'm just going over this because a patron reached out to me. He says, hey, Sean, I found this article. I would be interested to hear your take. So I am going to give you guys my assessment on this. Now, before we start, there are 2 things you got to know. If you click on the link to this particular article, it actually has an editor's note section that actually says this statement. You can trust the integrity of our balanced, independent financial advice. We may, however, receive compensation from the issuers of some products mentioned in this article. Opinions are the author's alone, and this content has not been provided by, reviewed, approved, or endorsed by any advertiser. But again, guys, they may, however, receive compensation from the issuers of some products mentioned in this article. So you guys know what that means. Now, I do want to give a lot of credit to the author because he does write something at the end of this article here that I do want to read to you guys because this is 100% true. There's a section entitled, Do Collectibles Belong in Your Portfolio? When it comes to alternate investments like collectibles, there's no cookie-cutter answer for deciding if they belong in your portfolio. Many investors stick with a rough 5 to 10% rule for alternative investments in their overall financial portfolios. This can include commodities, collectibles, and crypto. For others, collectibles are simply too speculative, which I've been telling you now for eons on this particular YouTube channel, and have no place in a portfolio. And for the more extreme, alternatives are the foundation of their investing strategy, which I would never recommend. Personally, I think focusing on growth stocks, ETFs, and dividend-paying stocks makes more sense, especially for younger investors who have compound interest on their side. And alternatives like real estate can also help you diversify your portfolio while generating income. I agree 100% with that, guys. However, if you want to explore an entirely new type of asset and don't mind the risks, collectibles could be for you. Just make sure you do your research, know the risks, and never invest money you can't afford to lose. To be fair, this last portion of this article is spot on. I agree with pretty much all of it. Now, with that being said, we are going to go through these 8 popular collectible investments, and I'm going to give you my opinion. The first popular collectible investment that he has listed is artwork. In all honesty, art is probably one of the most sophisticated markets in the entire antiques and collectibles trade. I can only think of a couple of markets that come close. And even like if we look at rare coins at least can be third-party graded. Rare coins can at least be certified even after they're graded by CAC. So there is an advantage that rare coins have that when we look at artwork, when we look at antique furniture, when we look at other more sophisticated markets, at least coins, there is a way for you to protect yourself as a consumer where there is no encapsulation service for rare art or antique furniture or antique glass. Those are markets that are much more sophisticated and require people to have specialized knowledge if you're going to attempt to invest in those markets. So when it comes to artwork, I will say this. It is true. It is really true if you analyze a lot of the top tier holdings in art. I'm talking about the paintings that sell for $100 million, $200 million, $400 million. Those particular pieces have done quite well on the secondary market. The problem is most people out there, except for very few, can afford to drop $100 million on a single painting. Therefore, guys, I hate to say this, but for the average person, art is probably not one of the best investments for you. Even if you are already well diversified, you have a well active, diversified financial portfolio already set up, you're already invested in real estate, you're already invested in other alternate asset classes. Art is something where there's a lot of risks in these markets, and you got to be aware of these risks. In my opinion, in all honesty, if you're going to attempt to invest in art, the best pieces to invest are $100,000 or more each. I hate to say that, but literally, if you came to me and you said, Sean, I want to invest in an Andy Warhol, that would be something that would qualify as investment grade, where a lot of pieces that sell for $5, $10, $15, $20,000, they're not the best investments that you can make unless you have insider knowledge, unless if you're really gambling with your money, trying to pretty much speculate on a new up and coming artist. If you want to take that risk, if you're a tech guru, maybe you're somebody that just works in tech and you make $500,000, $600,000 a year, and you want to diversify $50,000 into rare art, and you want to go after up and coming artists with the idea that, hey, if you at least hit one up and coming artist and they go gangbusters, those particular items that you're going to buy are going to skyrocket in value. If you're aware of the risk and you want to take that risk, I don't recommend it, but if that's what you want to do, you could potentially make money in this market. But for the average person, it is very, very bad advice. And I do want to bring this up. Under their assessment here, they bring up Masterworks. If you guys are unaware of Masterworks, it's one of those companies that deals with fractional share investing in the antiques and collectibles trade. Masterworks will take a painting and they will slice it up and sell shares, like you're purchasing shares of stock, where you can buy shares of that particular painting and you can attempt to invest that way. I honestly hate fractional share investing in the antiques and collectibles trade for the simple reason that you are pretty much taking an illiquid asset, you are wrapping management fees around it, and you're actually making it even more illiquid. So it's something that I caution people from. So I just want to be very clear. The world of art, especially high-end art, is not for the average investor, nor should it ever be. I want to make that very clear before we go to the next collecting category. Next collecting category on this list is trading cards. Now, let's be realistic here. When we use the term trading cards, that could mean everything from sports cards to Garbage Pail Kids cards to Marvel Universe trading cards, all the way up to and including Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! And the like. So when we use the umbrella term trading cards, let's just be honest, this collecting category is huge. Now, do I like trading cards for long-term investing? The answer is yes. Do I like trading cards for short-term speculation even? The answer is yes, but you have to know what you're buying. Right now in the year 2023, with the end of easy money, a lot of these markets have fallen 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50% or more in certain instances. If you can get into the market, you can buy right, and you know what you're doing, you understand your risk versus reward assessment, you understand how long you're going to be holding these particular items for, you understand opportunity cost of tying the money up in a trading card instead of a traditional investment like an S&P 500 index fund or a piece of real estate, whatever it is, you guys can do okay in this market. So I actually agree with their analysis of trading cards. I just wish they would have narrowed it down to a much more simpler or well-defined category. Now, they do mention here about Pokemon cards. They also bring up sports cards. So I'm assuming those are the two markets that they're looking at. But just know, trading cards can include everything from Garbage Pail Kids to wacky packages to all of these other esoteric trading cards like Star Wars trading cards that came out in the 70s and 80s. Whatever it is, just be careful what you buy, guys, because a lot of these markets are quite speculative. In my opinion, if you're going to invest in trading cards, you're better off going after sports cards, vintage sports cards on one side of the equation, or vintage Pokemon, vintage Magic the Gathering. That's how I would play this market. I would pretty much avoid everything in between. Just my opinion. Next, they bring up wine. Now, This is a market. I did actually early on do a video on wine investing. I'm due to do one on whiskey investing. I just haven't gotten around to it. I know you guys keep bringing it up. When am I going to do a video on whiskey investing? It is in the works. It's been in the works for many, many years. I just haven't gotten around to filming it. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When it comes to wine, I do not like investing in wine, especially for the average individual. Please understand that this is a high-risk market. It's highly regulated. Remember, you're dealing with an alcoholic beverage here, and there's a lot of risks on how you store, how you handle, and how you ship wine specifically. And there's a lot of auction houses that are playing in this market, and they're an absolute beast to deal with. I just want to be very clear. They will bankrupt you with fees in this market. I just want to be 100% honest and transparent. Wine, even whiskey, this is a very, very difficult market to get into simply due to the fact that it's a very esoteric niche market. And again, it is regulated because you are dealing with an alcoholic beverage. So just keep that in mind. They also bring up online investing platforms similar to Masterworks called Vint and Vinovest, which literally is like pretty much fractional share investing, except now you're doing it with wine. I do not like any of those platforms at all. Be very careful if you're getting involved in this market. If you are somebody who is a wine connoisseur, maybe you have a wine cellar set up in your house and you just have a taste for wine, do you. But don't try to invest in this market unless you know what you are doing. You will get slapped in the face with a stale grape, I assure you. Or I guess I should say sour grape. I guess that would fit better. So that's what's going to happen to you if you get into this market and you don't understand the risks. Wine is not something I recommend to the average investor. Even if you're somebody that comes to me and utilizes my consulting services in the antiques and collectibles trade, shameless plug, email me at reservedinvestments@gmail.com. If you do want to set up a consulting appointment, I usually tell people avoid wine. I usually really ask about your background if you're going to get involved in this market, what you know, how long have you been active in wine collecting? And then we go from there. Most people should not be attempting to invest in wine at all. It is a very bad asset class for the average individual. Next, comic books. Comic books, yes, I have nothing against comic books. If we're talking pre-1965 comic books, that's pretty much an established market. If we're talking about post-1965 comic books, especially the Bronze Age, Copper Age, those markets are still quite speculative. But overall, if you're looking at the market for comic books, if you can tolerate the volatility right now that is in this market because comic book prices have accelerated in value literally exponentially over the last 10 years, you can potentially look at this market right now, even with prices down like they are, anywhere from 10 to 40%. And you can see certain books that may have the power or the ability to pop over the next few years, over the next 10 years. It is possible. Now, with that being said, I do want to issue a warning about this market. Let me give you this as an example. Back in 2012, 2013, I bought a copy of House of Secrets 92 in CGC 9.4 condition. And that's the first appearance of Swamp Thing. That's a very key book if you are a DC Bronze Age horror collector. I guess you could even say superhero to a certain degree collector, because Swamp Thing's one of those characters. He's kind of cross-genre. He's like a interesting character in that universe. I think I paid $1,700 for that book back in 2012, 2013. I'd have to dig through my receipts to find it. Today, that particular comic book in CGC 9.4 condition is valued at anywhere from $16,000 to $18,000 in the open market if you go by what's listed on GP Analysis or even Go Collect. Now, that comic book in a 10-year span pretty much literally increased exponentially to the point where I'm able to take that book today that I paid $1,600, $1,700 for and add a zero to the value of it. Going forward over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I'm sorry to tell you, if you would go into the market today and you would buy a copy of House of Secrets 92 and CGC 9.4, and you would pay $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 for that book. I do not think that book in the next 10 years is going to sell for $100,000, $150,000, $160,000, $170,000, $180,000. It is not going to have the exponential increases that it had going forward like it did in the past 10 years when I bought it for $1,600 to $1,700. So this is how you have to analyze the comic book market going forward. And I don't think a lot of people have that understanding to realize that, hey, prices have gotten so out of control in the last 10 years, the comic book market is most likely not going to have the exponential gains going forward as a result. And this is something that unfortunately, a lot of the Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters don't want to come to the realization of, that a lot of their high-end collecting categories that they have a passion for have literally hit a plateau at present time, to the point where most likely prices are going to fall rather than go back up. And there's a lot of speculation in this market because of all the movies, like first appearance of Blade, Tomb of Dracula 10, Werewolf by Night 32, first appearance of Moon Knight. A lot of these books are soaring in value. Then either the movie comes out or the television show, Looking at You, Disney Plus, that streamed Moon Knight, and audiences eat it up, then they forget about it. And the price of the book just pretty much flatlines and falls. Same thing is happening right now with certain action figures. Look at what happened with Boba Fett collectibles. The Book of Boba Fett premiered on Disney Plus. And what happened? Boba Fett gained popularity, then boom, pretty much came crashing down because people realized, the Book of Boba Fett wasn't really that good. So let's continue. Classic cars is number 5. Under very few circumstances would I ever encourage you to invest in classic cars. Here's why, guys. Unlike a coin, unlike a comic book, unlike a toy, unlike a Pokemon card, unlike certain antiques, when it comes to classic cars, they require insurance, they require maintenance, and also there's expenses that you have with classic cars, storage for one, that you don't have with a lot of other collectible investments. Classic cars are best to invest in. If you are somebody, let's say that you own a really successful repair shop, auto body repair shop, classic car shop, where you work on classic cars, or maybe you have a modern era mechanic shop, you're just really good with cars, and you say, you know what, I want to buy like a Thunderbird, a classic Thunderbird car, and I want to put it on display just because I made all this money working on cars. I want to give back. I want to have this particular piece of memorabilia. If that's you, you do you. Then if it breaks down, you have the know-how, you have the skills, you have the mechanics on site where they can fix it, they can get it in top working position for you. When it comes to the average person, however, the average person should not be investing in classic cars. It is a losing proposition in most cases. Now, if you are somebody, going back to the point 1 I made when we talked about art, you're somebody, you got a net worth of like $100 million, $1 billion, and you want to own a really expensive classic car like a Ferrari or a Porsche or a Jaguar or any of those cars where you're getting a vintage version that has a lot of demand on the secondary market, you can make money in these markets. But it is not for the average individual. That's why if you go look in certain videos, I hold up a book called Collectible Investments for the High Net Worth Investor. On the cover of that book, I think I have it somewhere back here, is actually a picture of a Rolls Royce. The type of person that has the net worth that can invest in those markets, if he can afford a vintage Rolls Royce, yeah, you can make money in that particular field. The average person should not touch this market or come anywhere close. Next, historical artifacts and antiques. I honestly love this category. You guys know I'm a huge coin collector. I invest in currency as well. I also invest in edge weapons, firearms, historical documents. If you're somebody that understands the way those markets work, the fact where if you're going to invest in a historical piece that's signed by like Albert Einstein or F. Scott Fitzgerald or FDR, take your pick, you need to realize that there really is no third-party grading to help you. You're pretty much going by what an auction company is telling you if you're going to bid on those particular pieces. So you have to do your research. That's why I usually tell people, if you're going to get into historical artifacts and antiques, I would encourage you to learn the rare coin market, learn the high-end currency market, and start there, then branch out. You may find that you're happy investing in rare coins and currency because those items can be third-party graded. You may not ever have a desire to want to buy like a signed letter from FDR or a signed letter from Albert Einstein or a piece that was like signed by F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of my favorite book, The Great Gatsby. So that's up to you. But there is a lot of potential in that market because, again, unlike pop culture collectibles, when you talk about high-end antiques, they're more robust. They're more valid. There's more liquidity there because people are more willing to invest in history than that of pop culture over the long term. Remember, guys, antique markets are more cyclical than collectible markets. Collectible markets are more linear. At some point, they tend to die out, like Pez dispensers or, vintage Daisy BB guns, Lionel toy trains, vintage toy robots. Those markets are all examples of pop culture collectibles. Schwinn bicycles. Those markets are not going to be taking the world by storm anytime soon. As a matter of fact, the collectors that collect those particular items that I just mentioned, they're pretty much getting older. They're starting to downsize. I hate to say this. Some of those individuals are getting ready to be put into the ground, meaning they're dying off. As a result, I would not be putting your net worth in Lionel toy trains, Schwinn bicycles, even Pez dispensers. Those markets are not coming back anytime soon. Next collecting category, figurines and toys. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with these markets. You guys know if I'm going to invest in like vintage Star Wars, it has to be something durable. That's why I like going after proof Star Wars cards, meaning the action figures that they created back in the 1970s and 80s. Before those action figures were put into production, they created a card back that was sent out for people to review and say, hey, this is what the card back that figure is going to be attached to is going to look like. Do you guys like this design? I like going after the pre-production pieces that can be easily graded by Action Figure Authority. Those are the type of items I love investing in. I do not like investing in the play sets and the actual figures themselves simply because those particular items are extremely fragile. And I've said this before on this channel. I know people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars assembling a rare toy collection. And they have this one toy, it's graded by AFA, and it just so happens the bubble is coming detached from the card back. Guess what? Even if it's in an AFA case, you've just lost thousands of dollars. Same thing is true. Those of you that go after some of these play sets, like I'm going to pick on He-Man, Masters of the Universe. I know a guy that had to buy a factory-sealed Eternia playset. It's a very rare item, and back in the day, he spent something like $10,000 to get this item. He was thrilled when prices started accelerating for this. He goes and checks on it. The tape is drying out. The item is now actually opened. He's not going to be able to sell it as a factory-sealed collectible anymore. There is a lot of risk when we start talking about vintage toys. The materials they used to produce toys back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they used very cheap materials. This is why a lot of your later Star Wars figures, if you look at the bubble, the actual bubble that contains the figure, it's starting to yellow. These particular items were not meant to be held for the long term. So as somebody that grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I, of course, love these items, but I don't really invest in them for that reason. They're too risky. It's just like I know people that have vintage prototype rocket-firing Boba Fett figures graded by AFA, and even in the AFA case, they're starting to deteriorate. They're starting to develop frosting. they're starting to discolor. That is going to affect the value of those items if you consign them to an auction house. You guys need to use intelligence and apply it to these markets. I get it that you love these markets. I love them too. But certain markets are not meant for long-term investment for that reason. Which brings us to the last collecting category that they recommend, which is sneakers. Same thing that I just said about vintage toys applies to sneakers. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. There was a dude who had a museum, I think it was out in Nevada somewhere, that was devoted to vintage Nike sneakers and the like. All of these collectible sneakers that came out in the late 80s, 1990s with Air Jordans. And the reason why he shut down the museum and started selling off a lot of these pieces is because the wonderful components that make up a lot of your sneakers were not meant to last over the long term. The white in a lot of the sneakers, the foam that they used, pretty much yellows very easily. And it also disintegrates. Even if you keep it in a climate-controlled environment, you keep it away from sun, you pretty much store it hermetically, you keep it in its natural form, it is still going to break down. And as a result, this, in my opinion, makes sneakers over the long term a very bad investment. Now, if you're a speculator, if you're one of these guys, like if you ever watched the Netflix show Sneakerheads, I thought that was pretty well done during the pandemic. I was watching it, where they just go to stores and they get the latest sneakers, and maybe they buy a pair to wear, maybe they buy a pair to collect, and they flip the rest in the secondary market so other people can enjoy them. If you want to do that, that's fine. But if you're trying to invest long-term in this market, understand the risks. These particular materials that sneakers were made from were not designed to last long-term, guys. At some point, it's going to break down, and it's going to affect the value of that collectible. Believe me, I know a lot of people that made a ton of money in this market. And the name of the game, they told me this when they got in it. They knew themselves that you can hold this stuff for a couple of years. After a couple of years, you got to let it go. You let somebody else take the risk, because these items are going to start to deteriorate while you own them. It is too much of a risk. So with that being said, I am going to post the link to this full article below. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as well. And I just want to let you guys know, again, I am not recommending this particular article, although I do agree with the point of view that I already read from that says, do collectibles belong in your portfolio? I think the author did a good job with that. I just question some of these collecting categories that he put in this particular piece to state that people should be investing in over the short term or over the long term. And I just gave you my reasons why. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.